So today I'm just going to do a quick comparison between two budget 5G smartphones from Xiaomi. I've got the Mi 10T Lite and the Redmi Note 9T. Now 5G is becoming a pretty popular addition in a lot of phones these days, including phones for less than £200. So this is just a couple of options for you. We'll see what they're like, see how they compare and see which one is the better buy. So first up is the Xiaomi Mi 10T Lite. So up front you get a 6.67 inch Full HD IPS LCD display with HDR10 support and a 120Hz refresh rate and Gorilla Glass 5. So it should be a nice and durable display. It's nice and bright with good colour reproduction, although I do have the colour settings set to saturated, but of course you can adjust this to your liking. So it's just an LCD panel instead of an AMOLED screen found on other Xiaomi phones, so you don't get those really deep blacks and clean whites, but for most people this will be absolutely fine. It's by no means a bad screen. Up in the top centre of the screen you have a punch hole cutout which houses the 16 megapixel f2.5 selfie camera, which can record video up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. And photos from this camera are good quality with plenty of detail. I did notice that colours can have a slightly washed out look, but for the most part these photos are completely usable. If we look on the bottom of the phone, you get a bottom firing speaker, microphone, USB-C charging port which supports up to 33 watt fast charging, and a headphone jack. On the left of the phone is your SIM tray, which you can house 2 SIM cards or 1 SIM card and a micro SD card. And on the right is your volume rocker, and below that your power button with integrated fingerprint sensor, which I found to be nice and responsive. It works every time. And up top there's an IR blaster and microphone, but also there's another speaker built into the earpiece, so we have dual speakers, which again is nice at this price. The sides of the phone are made of plastic, which is a bit unfortunate given that the back of the phone is also made of glass, which is nice to have at this price. And this is also Gorilla Glass 5, so you should be pretty resistant to scratches, and if you use the bundled clear case you should be able to keep it scuff free. And then up the top you have your round camera module, which houses the 64 megapixel f1.9 main camera, which can shoot 4K video at 30 frames per second. This is followed by an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide camera with a 120 degree field of view. And then sadly, the last two are the obligatory 2 megapixel macro and depth cameras, but again, this is something that's just added to most budget phones. Photos produced from the Mi 10T Lite offer plenty of detail with good colour, with a 16 megapixel default resolution thanks to the 4-in-1 pixel binning. The ultra wide of course isn't as good quality, but adds an area of versatility which is now the standard in most budget phones. In terms of the battery, you get a large 4820 mAh battery, which is slightly smaller than the 5000 mAh batteries found in most other budget phones, but I've found that it still lasted me all day. I don't rinse phones that I use anyway, normally have 2 to 3 hours of screen on time, and normally come home from work with anywhere between 50 and 60% left, so there's no complaints here. But if you are a heavy user and are running low, the 33 watt fast charging should get you going in no time, with 0 to almost 70% in 30 minutes and a full charge taken just shy of an hour. So the slightly smaller battery of this phone does have its benefits. And finally, powering the Mi 10T Lite is the upper mid-range Snapdragon 750G 5G processor. This is built on an 8nm process, so nice and power efficient, and it's also no slouch, offering increased performance in some areas over the 765G from last year. So if you're an average user, anything you throw at the Mi 10T Lite, it should handle stutter free, and my day-to-day use has been a breeze. 0 stutters on anything I've done, apps open instantly, I've had no issues at all with my usage of this phone. On my model there's 6GB of RAM with 64GB of UFS 2.1 storage. There's also a model with 6GB of RAM and 128GB of UFS 2.2 storage, both of which are of course expandable if needed. And just a quick touch on colour, I have the Mi 10T Lite in Atlantic Blue, but this is also available in Pearl Grey or Rose Gold Beach. So up next is the Redmi Note 9T, but for video purposes I'm just going to call it the 9T. I'll start where I left off the Mi 10T Lite and quickly talk colours. Now of course the colour I have here won't be for everyone, it certainly isn't for me. This is what Xiaomi are calling Daybreak Purple, but the 9T is also available in Nightfall Black, which I think most people will go for. So up front, there's a 6.53 inch Full HD IPS LCD display, also with Gorilla Glass 5. Sadly, this display is only a standard 60Hz and there's no HDR10 support, so that's already two things that the Mi 10T Lite has an advantage in. But nevertheless, this display is just as bright with nice colours, but again, the colour settings are set to my taste, possibly not yours. Up in the top left corner of the display is the punch hole cutout, which houses a 13 megapixel f2.3 selfie camera with video recording also topping out at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Photos from the selfie camera are definitely not as good as the Mi 10T Lite. There's noticeably less detail and colours aren't as vibrant. And I know photos are subjective and you could argue that the Mi 10T Lite's photos are over sharpened, but to be honest, if they are, I do prefer this look. The setup on the bottom of the phone is very similar, with the only difference being the microphone is located in a slightly different place. Other than that, it's the same. On the left of the 9T is the SIM tray, which this time you can house 2 SIM cards as well as a micro SD card. And on the right is identical with your volume rocker and power button with integrated fingerprint reader. I actually prefer this placement of the fingerprint reader than the ones on the back of the phone. Up top there's an IR blaster and microphone, and as with the Mi 10T Lite, there's also dual speakers with that second speaker in the earpiece. If we flip the phone over to have a nice full view of that daybreak purple, it's a plastic rear this time, but this time it's a textured back, which should be nice and resistant to fingerprints, and does make the 9T that much easier to use without a case. Whether you would or not with this colour is up to you. And then up in the centre, the 9T also has a round camera module, which houses the triple camera setup. Now unfortunately there's no quad camera setup here, and the more unfortunate thing is they've done away with the 8 megapixel ultra wide, so instead you have a 48 megapixel f1.8 main camera which can record video at 4K at 30 frames per second, and then sadly there's the 2 megapixel macro and depth cameras as well. Personally, I would have liked to have seen Xiaomi ditch the 2 megapixel macro lens and swap it out for an 8 megapixel or even a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera to help cut costs. And photos from the main camera perform commendably, again producing nice detailed 12 megapixel photos with plenty of detail and colour. Now let's talk battery. On the Redmi Note 9T you get a 5000 mAh battery stuffed inside, which will last you all day, no worries. But sadly charging speeds are downgraded to 18 watts from the 33 watts found on the Mi 10T Lite, which means that 30 minutes of charging will only get you just over 30%, while a full charge from zero will take around 1 hour and 50 minutes, so the Mi 10T Lite definitely has the advantage here. And lastly, onto performance. Under the hood of the Redmi Note 9T is the MediaTek Dimensity 800U 5G processor. This is built on a 7nm process, so again power and power efficiency should be plenty. Again, I encountered no lag or stutters during my time with this phone. Gaming should be handled no problem with this chip, as long as detail settings are toned down a bit. There are 3 RAM and storage options to choose from with the 9T. I have the model with 4GB of RAM and 128GB of UFS 2.2 storage. There's also a model with 6GB of RAM and 128GB, and a base model with 4GB of RAM and 64GB of UFS 2.1 storage. And again, all are expandable. So that's my comparison between the Xiaomi Mi 10T Lite and the Redmi Note 9T. Now which one I would pick personally? I'd pick the Mi 10T Lite for 3 reasons, and that's the screen, the camera and the build. So the screen, you get 120Hz refresh rate over the 9T60. The camera, you get a quad camera setup with that 8 megapixel ultra wide, which the Redmi Note 9T lacks. And build, you get Gorilla Glass 5 on the back instead of a plastic build. But then also you get 33 watt fast charging over the Redmi Note 9T's 18 watts as well. So it's quite compelling to get the Mi 10T Lite over the Redmi Note 9T, and at the moment they cost about the same money. Which one would you pick? Let me know in the comments. Or is there another 5G phone that you would pick? Also let me know in the comments as well. And if you like what you see, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I upload a new video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.